is Marvel Comics Civil War. Every American hero was faced with a devastating choice. Join Iron Man's Pro-Superhero Registration Act team, reveal their identity, and become a government agent. Or join Captain America's anti-registration team and become a wanted fugitive. A decade later, Civil War's popularity inspired the Marvel Cinematic Universe to tell a similar story, where Iron Man and Cap faced off in Marvel Studios' Captain America Civil War. But even 20 years after the original comic event, readers are still debating who was on the right side, Cap or Iron Man. Which side would you choose? This is Marvel Recap Civil War, with a special shout out to the official handbook of the Marvel Universe Research Team and the Marvel Studios Story Team for their help. The legislation that would become the Superhuman Registration Act was based on the earlier Mutant Affairs Control Act, or as it would come to be known, the Mutant Registration Act. The law required all Americans born with superhuman powers to register with the government. Its architect, Senator Robert Kelly, argued that there were too many superhuman mutants being born and that they posed a threat to national security and humanity itself. Early on in Kelly's crusade to curtail mutants, the X-Men sensed the threat that mutant registration could pose to them, so they used a sophisticated virus program to erase all evidence of their existence from government computers. Years later, Congress would propose expanding the act to include all superhuman beings, seemingly to recruit them into their military forces. But the Fantastic Four's Mr. Fantastic, otherwise known as Mr. Reed Richards, dissuaded them by saying that government regulation would slow heroes down and pointing out that several congressmen tested positive for mutant genes. Oh, and that he might just reveal that during an election. However, that didn't mean that support for the act disappeared. Years later, a new Superhuman Registration Act was proposed, and Tony Stark was called to testify. Stark told his protege, Peter Parker, the alter ego of Spider-Man, that while he thought the senators had a point, he felt compelled to speak against the bill. The senators justified the proposed law, saying that the U.S. had suffered almost $200 billion in damages from superhuman battles since 1946, while Stark presented evidence that the superheroes had stopped North America from being, quote, vaporized, conquered, or nuked back to the Stone Age 47 times. The hearing was interrupted by the Russian mercenary, the Titanium Man, who sought to kill Stark. But Spider-Man was able to drive him away using his new Iron Spider armor. Stark used the attack to argue that America's enemies wanted superpowered citizens to be disarmed. While he didn't defeat the bill, Stark felt that they'd bought a year or two to come up with a plan to stop it. What Stark didn't tell Peter Parker was that he hired the Titanium Man to crash the hearing, and that while Stark might have delayed the Superhuman Registration Act slightly, it would take a real tragedy to make this bill become a reality. That tragedy began in Stamford, Connecticut, when the New Warriors attempted to capture a group of supervillains that they'd tracked to a suburban neighborhood, all while on camera. They were filming an episode of a reality show following their crime-stopping adventures. During the battle, the supervillain Nitro, a human bomb, exploded. The blast killed most of the New Warriors, along with over 600 civilians, including 60 schoolchildren. Even though other superheroes soon arrived to help rescue survivors, public opinion quickly turned against superhumans. One of the first casualties was the Fantastic Four's Human Torch, Johnny Storm, who was brutally beaten by an angry mob outside of a nightclub, leaving him in a coma. Soon, the government revived the idea of the Superhuman Registration Act, and the superhero community was split into two camps. Some, like Tony Stark, supported registration. While he'd fought against the legislation before, he had a change of heart after a grieving mother spat on him at the Stamford Memorial service. According to him, becoming public employees made perfect sense if it helped people sleep a little easier. However, others felt differently. When S.H.I.E.L.D. director Maria Hill ordered Steve Rogers, alias Captain America, to lead the Avengers in capturing unregistered heroes, he refused, saying, "You're asking me to arrest people who risk their lives for this country every day of the week. When Hill's hit squad turned on Cap, he jumped from the helicarrier onto a nearby plane. Then he took the pilot out for a burger and fries, because he's Captain Frickin' America. But as the Registration Act moved towards ratification, Iron Man stepped forward to champion it, with the help of Reed Richards and Henry Pym, who was using the codename Yellow Jacket at the time. And to prove his support, Tony Stark held a press conference where he revealed his identity as Iron Man to the world. As the act moved towards becoming law, Tony Stark worked to recruit more heroes to his side. Meanwhile, Reed Richards began to work on a mysterious government project known only as Project 42. While Peter Parker remained Stark's closest ally, their friendship started to become strained after Tony pressured him to publicly reveal his identity. Concerned about the threat to his family, Peter turned to his wife Mary Jane and Aunt May for advice. May advised him to reveal his identity, saying, "Some things are worth the risk, Peter. You're one of them." And so, despite his concerns, Spider-Man unmasked himself to the world. This revelation shocked his friends and colleagues. The newspaper where he worked, the Daily Bugle, even served Peter with a lawsuit, accusing him of committing fraud by selling them photos of himself as Spider-Man. And Peter's fears were justified, as one of his greatest enemies, Wilson Fisk, the crime boss called the Kingpin, secretly hired an assassin to kill Peter's family. When the law was ratified, the government began rounding up any unregistered heroes, starting with Patriot and the other Young Avengers, Wiccan, Hulkling, Stature, and Hawkeye. However, they were rescued by Cap's team of secret Avengers, who'd set up a secret base in an underground bunker that had belonged to former S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury. To stay underground, Cap's team adopted new secret identities and some impressive mustaches, while they continued to help people in need. But not every superhero chose a side, as Tony Stark was unable to convince the X-Men to publicly support the act. The X-Men believed hunting down rebel heroes would go against everything they stood for. And when Tony tried to convince the mutant Emma Frost to back the bill by mentioning the loss of life in Stamford, she simply asked, "Where were the Avengers when Genosha died, Iron Man?" She was referring to the mutant nation that was destroyed by anti-mutant Sentinel robots, an attack that killed 16 million mutants in one day. However, the desire to protect mutants from similar attacks led some X-Men to break their neutrality, with mutant law enforcement officer Lucas Bishop joining Iron Man's side and the time-traveling freedom fighter Cable aligning with Cap. As the Fantastic Four waited for the Torch to come out of his coma, they discovered that they too were divided over the act. While Reed Richards supported it, his wife Sue, the Invisible Woman, was against it. Ben Grimm, the ever-loving blue-eyed thing, remained on the fence. When a protest broke out on Yancey Street, where Ben grew up, he told the protesters that he didn't support the law, but he also wasn't going to be fighting in the streets about it either. But when those protesters attacked a government convoy of captured superhumans, one of Ben's friends was injured. Ben turned on both sides, saying he was checking out of the country and he may not come back. He ended up emigrating to France, where he joined the French super team, Les Heroes de Paris. One of the most surprising anti-registration heroes turned out to be Robbie Baldwin, better known as Speedball, the sole surviving member of the New Warriors. While his ability to absorb kinetic energy allowed him to survive Nitro's explosion, Speedball soon found himself arrested for his part in the Stamford tragedy. His attorney, Jennifer Walters, the ex-Avenger She-Hulk, managed to get him community service on the condition that he register, but Speedball refused. We soon learned what Reed had been working on when Speedball and other unregistered superhumans were transferred to a prison located in the other-dimensional Negative Zone. Its code name, Prison 42. Tensions between the two sides finally erupted into violence when Cap's team arrived to help stop a refinery fire, only to be ambushed by Iron Man's team. Cap agreed to a truce and then used a S.H.I.E.L.D. Electron Scrambler to disable Tony's armor. The two sides brawled until a blast of lightning revealed a new combatant, Thor, the god of thunder. However, this Thor was far more brutal than his usual self. and when giant man Bill Foster fought back, Thor killed him. Sue Richards' force field stopped Thor before he could kill anyone else and allowed Cap's team to escape. Reed Richards used a code word to shut Thor down, revealing that this Thor was actually a clone created and controlled by Reed. Sue stormed off, refusing to speak to her husband. The rest of Tony's teammates were left in shock, with Spidey wondering if they'd picked the wrong side, saying, "I thought you knew what you were doing, Tony. I thought we were doing this so no one else got hurt." Bill Foster's death had a huge impact on both sides of the war. On Cap's side, several team members including Stature, Nighthawk, and Cable left the team, saying they joined up to fight villains, not cops and other superheroes. But they also gained some new members, as after Johnny woke up from his coma, he and Sue left the Fantastic Four to join Cap's team. Bill Foster's death also caused some pro-registration forces to leave Stark's side. To bolster the ranks, he assembled a new team of former supervillains, the Thunderbolts, to track down Cap's secret Avengers. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Sharon Carter, codenamed Agent 13, was caught in the middle, as she was also tasked with hunting down the secret Avengers while secretly in a relationship with their leader, Captain America. She was unaware that her therapist was actually the criminal Dr. Faustus in disguise. He used that position to secretly manipulate Sharon's feelings, sowing the seeds for her to betray S.H.I.E.L.D. for Cap's longtime foe, the Red Skull. As the war raged on, many of the combatants found themselves questioning their chosen side. Spider-Man visited the Negative Zone prison, where he found captured heroes begging to be released. He was horrified to learn that this wasn't just a short-term solution, as those prisoners would be held there for life if they didn't register. Peter tried to flee with Mary Jane and Aunt May, only to be tackled by Tony. Peter argued that Tony was in over his head, while Tony maintained that all of this was just a temporary measure. But as S.H.I.E.L.D. agents arrived, Peter fled into the night. Maria Hill sent the Thunderbolts after him, and soon Peter was being chased through the sewers by two of the supervillains on Iron Man's side, Jester and Jack-O-Lantern. But just as they had a wounded Peter cornered, they were suddenly shot by a mysterious figure, who turned out to be the Punisher. The Punisher revealed that he'd been secretly helping Cap's team from the shadows ever since he learned that S.H.I.E.L.D. was recruiting criminals to their side. And while Cap was uneasy about the Punisher's shoot first and never bother asking questions because they're criminals' philosophy, he reluctantly accepted the vigilante onto the team. But just as Cap's team gained a member, they lost Daredevil, who was arrested and brought to Prison 42. As he was sealed away, he gave Tony Stark a silver dollar, saying, "Guess that's only 31 pieces of silver you've got now, huh? Sleep well, Judas." Although we should add that this Daredevil wasn't Matt Murdock. This Daredevil was actually Danny Rand, who Matt hired to swap the Iron Fist uniform for the red suit and pretend to be Daredevil, while Matt was behind bars in a story we don't have time to get into right now. The stress of the war continued to weigh on Tony, who started to show some signs of instability. During a visit to the White House, Iron Man attacked Wakanda's King T'Challa and Queen Aurora, the royal titles of Black Panther and Storm, when they wouldn't support registration. Soon, Tony, who was a recovering alcoholic, was ready to start drinking again. But before he could take a sip, he was confronted by a furious Sue Richards, who blamed him for the collapse of her marriage. After Stark punched a hole through a glass wall, he poured out the bottle and sat alone in his apartment, praying. Despite Iron Man's breakdown, the pro-registration side continued to grow as S.H.I.E.L.D. began training superheroes to join teams they established in every state in what they called their 50-state initiative. Meanwhile, Cap sent the Punisher to infiltrate the Baxter Building in search of more information on Prison 42. Realizing they'd need more bodies to attack such a protected position, Steve sent Sue Richards to try and convince the Atlantean prince Namor the Submariner to join their side. While planning a mission to free the captives from Prison 42, Cap was approached by two supervillains, Goldbug and the Plunderer, who wanted to join up. They were immediately gunned down by the Punisher, who refused to work with criminals. Cap responded by beating up the Punisher, but the vigilante refused to fight back out of respect for Cap. Ultimately, Steve Rogers threw the Punisher out of the base. But Cap's team went ahead with the mission and infiltrated Prison 42, only to find themselves face to face with Iron Man's team. The two teams squared off against each other in Prison 42, where Iron Man revealed to Captain America that one of Tony's defectors, Tigra, had been a mole. But Steve upstaged Tony by revealing that Yellow Jacket had been replaced by the shapeshifter Hulkling. Oh, and since he could mimic Pym's vocal patterns, he also released all of the prisoners. The two teams attacked each other. S.H.I.E.L.D. was quick to seal all portals to the prison, but Cloak used his teleportation abilities to transport everyone into Manhattan, where the battle continued. The Thunderbolts attacked Captain America and captured him, only to be stopped by the sudden arrival of Namor and his Atlantean army. But just as it seemed Cap had the upper hand, Iron Man's initiative team arrived with Reed's Thor clone, who received a mighty punch from Hercules. Ben Grimm returned to help protect civilians, bearing witness to Reed taking a shot from Taskmaster in order to save Sue, who then smashed Taskmaster with a force field. Hercules battled the Thor clone, saying, "I knew Thor. Thor was a friend of mine, and thou art no Thor," while destroying the clone with its own hammer. Meanwhile, Steve had managed to incapacitate Tony, who told his former ally to finish it. But just as he was about to deliver a final blow, Steve was tackled by a group of emergency workers. They forced Cap to realize the damage he and his allies were doing. He was brought to tears, saying, "We're not fighting for the people anymore. We're just fighting." He unmasked himself, saying they weren't arresting Captain America, but Steve Rogers. And with that, he ordered his side to stand down. After heroes from both sides worked to clean up the city, the 50-state initiative moved forward as planned. Tony Stark was made director of S.H.I.E.L.D., saying that he couldn't let anyone else guard his friends' secret identities. While the war was over, the consequences of it would shake the Marvel Universe for years to come. When Spider-Man returned to his loved ones after battle, they were targeted by the Kingpin's assassin, who shot Aunt May. Peter brutally beat down Kingpin in revenge as May fell into a coma. Peter's desire to cure Aunt May would lead him to strike a deal with the demonic Mephisto, who granted him his wishes in exchange for erasing Peter's marriage to Mary Jane, something that would cause Spider-Man great suffering and advance the demon's long-range plans for the wall crawler. Reed and Sue Richards decided to reconcile and left the Fantastic Four to repair their marriage. They brought in Black Panther and Storm to take their place on the team and turned part of the Baxter Building into a Wakandan embassy, as the original had been destroyed during the war's final battle. The Commission on Superhuman Affairs assembled a new Thunderbolts team to capture unregistered heroes. One of the new members was the former Speedball, who decided to sign the Registration Act. He took on the name Penance and donned armor with one spike for each civilian who died in the Stamford incident, spikes that constantly injured him, triggering his kinetic powers. And as director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Tony organized a new Avengers team, led by Carol Danvers in her capacity as Miss Marvel, which would be known as the Mighty Avengers. Cap's underground heroes were offered amnesty if they registered, and many took up the offer, becoming members of the initiative. However, others remained underground, including Luke Cage's fugitive New Avengers. But the most shocking outcome occurred when Captain America was brought to his arraignment hearing. In the middle of the crowd of protesters, reporters, and law enforcement, Steve was shot and killed by Sharon Carter, who was still brainwashed by Dr. Faustus. Afterwards, Tony confessed to Steve's corpse that while he believed he was right in being pro-registration, it wasn't worth the cost of losing his friend. Steve Rogers was buried with full honors in Arlington National Cemetery. However, that body was only a replica. 3 days later, Tony and a few friends, including Namor, gave Steve's real body a burial in the Arctic, giving him the solitude and peace he'd experienced while being frozen in the ice after World War II. But that left one big question: who would carry Cap's shield and the title of Captain America? Tony revealed that Cap's final wish was for Bucky Barnes, Cap's former sidekick and brainwashed Soviet assassin, the Winter Soldier, to become Captain America. Bucky agreed on the condition that Tony used S.H.I.E.L.D.'s technology to ensure he couldn't be mind-controlled again. Tony obliged and created a new Cap suit for Bucky, who officially became a brand new and very shiny Captain America. Afterwards, it was revealed that Cap wasn't actually killed, but flung out of time. He was eventually brought back by the Red Skull, who intended to place his evil mind in Cap's perfect specimen of a body. However, Cap's spirit was too strong, and the Skull was driven out of his mind, leaving Cap back in his own body and among the living again. Much later, Tony and Cap mended fences and resumed their deep friendship. In the MCU, the Civil War played out very differently.